what we want to do is we want to kind of segue into the next course, Mike, unless you have any other comments that you'd like to make.
Well, I just would like to add one more, and just, from a leadership perspective, that, not only we want you to get focused on leads, and Cutting Edge Media is really the pioneer of the industry as far as I'm concerned, within our entire industry. But not only should you get focused on leads following a system, but we also want to help you encourage this entire process, this entire training program to everybody in your organization. Just imagine having 10 key people working with you in your business, and all 10 of them are constantly working leads. They're profitable every month. They're bringing in new people into the business. I mean, you have to look at that long term, folks, because 12, 24, 36 months down the road, now keep in mind, they're teaching that to their people as well. And that's why it's so important to get fired up about your client database, establish it, make sure you run with it, and teach this philosophy to everybody in your organization.
I think that what we got to do, Mike, real quick, is just go ahead and kind of, talk about, we're going to roll into that really is prioritizing your leads. And I think that that's, vital to your success. And we're going to share some things. So let's go ahead and roll over to course number 3.
Yeah, and, prioritizing your leads, folks, this is a very, very critical stepping stone for you to be successful with your business and working your leads. And here's something I want you to write down. Number 1, be accountable. It's so important. I mean, could you imagine if you own Coca-Cola, as Mike referenced that earlier? Would you not be accountable for your daily mode of operation? I mean, how much money you spend on every item that comes through the entire building. You have to treat yourself in your opportunity. Obviously, you're the CEO, like a business. Mike mentioned that, but we must be accountable. Here's an example. What time do you call your prospects? What I recommend is that you write down the first contact might be in the morning. We'll make a note that you made the first call in the AM. Let's say you make another call. Well, now we know not to make it in the AM because they're not there. So we're going to do it in the afternoon. Write that down, or the evening. But just being accountable, that little simple step is amazing. It took me a long time, Mike, to learn that. I learned it from somebody who just said, you ought to start tracking your times when you call your prospects. And I'm thinking, well, people have told me I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I've had fun working the leads. And once I became accountable, all I'm going to tell you is that it increased my recruiting. It'll do the same for you. So recognize what time you call. Also, I feel a component of prioritizing your leads, and I know Mike will agree because we've talked about this, 2 of my favorite days to call leads, which will help you time management-wise. Number 1, Saturdays. I absolutely love Saturdays. We're talking about 10 a.m. to about 1 p.m. Eastern, and this is when people are home. They like to sleep in. They've had a long week. They're hanging out with the kids. They're doing stuff around the yard, but make a long story short, 10 to 1 o'clock on Saturday is prime time. Sunday evening has been an excellent night for calling back. And I know some people are religious and they may not want to do any business, but the majority of people looking into a business, they're not going to have any problem with the follow-up call on a Sunday evening. Here's what I do know. Most people are home on Sunday evening, so it works. Also, I want to mention to every single one of you to write this down. Establish a ratio. This will not only increase your confidence, your self-esteem, it'll enable you to focus on the long-term commitment that we must have in working any lead program. But here's the bottom line. You have to develop a ratio. And I want you to, even if you have to use a pad of paper, your journal, or create something on an Excel file, you have a list lead. And what I love about Cutting Edge Media leads is you can just print them out. You got their name, address, phone number, email. I make my notes when I call them, exactly what happened, if I had a voicemail, so on and so forth. We're going to teach you some things here today on what to do when that happens. But the bottom line is every time you make a contact, you're eventually going to make presentations. You're going to have some people that will join and some people that will not join. And some people you will never even talk to. But here's the bottom line. If you develop a ratio, you are going to be 10 times more successful, folks. You can ask Jim Rohn. You can read it in his books. You can look at somebody in baseball. I like to use a sports analogy. Let's say you're batting 300 working leads. In other words, you have 10 solid prospects. You may have bought 25 leads, but let's say you got 10 solid prospects. And out of those 10, let's just say on average, 2 to 3 join. And I'm just giving you some realistic numbers over time. You go through the entire process, which we're going to talk about here today, but 2 or 3 people join out of 10 solid prospects. Remember, you may have started with 25 or more. But here's the bottom line. You're batting 300. You're batting 250. Folks, if you look at the average Major League Baseball player in America that bats 250 to 300, they're multimillionaires, folks. In our industry, you can do the same. If you're batting 200-300, folks, don't get down on yourself. I've heard people say, I've worked 10 of the greatest leads I've ever seen in my life, and they were excited. They were great people, and I only signed up 2. But you know what? That's an excellent average. But it's more important for you to be focused on your ratio. Develop your ratio immediately from the beginning. When you have a batch of leads, how many do you have? How many contacts did it take to make a presentation? How many presentations did you have to make to have somebody join your business? How many did not join? You know what? Being accountable, just tracking everything you do, developing a ratio. And Mike, I know you're going to agree with me on this. It just makes our life easier.
Well, accountability is everything, and you nailed it. And I always tell my people in my organization that Sundays are gold. Sunday evenings are absolute gold. And the reason why is because that's when people are ready and they think about Monday. They got to go back to work. They're kind of dreading it. They got the traffic. They got things of that nature. So I understand. And Saturday mornings is when they're relaxing. They're unwinding from the week and they're home. And I think that you want to maximize your time. And the way to do that is to start understanding that those are 2 very, very good times. Now, does that work for everyone? No, absolutely not. That's why you got to be consistent and persistent to be able to make these calls and make these dials. Now, in developing the ratio, Mike, I completely agree with that. You got to know exactly what's going to happen because success is numbers, is what Jim Rohn has always said. It's a numbers game. And the more people you're going to talk to, the more money you're going to make. It's that simple. That's what excites me, is that I knew it is that simple. It really is. You're listening today. Understand that if I lined up 100 people in a row or 1,000 people in a row in a single file line, and I told you to walk through every single one of them, give your company's presentation at the end of that 1,000 people, when you did that without even thinking twice about it, at the end of that meant a 6-figure income to you. Would you go do it? Well, absolutely. Then what are you waiting for?